Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian Donnelly. The Spirits Educator is a digital education platform and trade resource for the distilled spirits industry. My aim is to provide in-depth spirits information, brand transparency, and category education for distributor sales teams, service industry and hospitality members, and motivated enthusiasts. I currently work for a major wine and spirits distributor, but my work here on the Spirits Educator is completely unaffiliated with my current employer. Today I'm going to be talking about Castle & Key, the distillery that carries on the distilling legacy of the famous Colonel E.H. Taylor. I'm going to be referencing a script that I wrote so I can communicate all this information correctly. If you would like to read my full write-up, I'll include a link below in the description. The Castle & Key Distillery, Kentucky DSP, or Distilled Spirits Plant Number 18, is a modern distillery built on the historic site of the Old Taylor Distillery, created by bourbon legend Colonel E.H. Taylor in 1887 as the culmination of his life's work. The property is located in Frankfort, Kentucky, just a 20-minute drive from the present-day Buffalo Trace Distillery. When it was built, the Old Taylor Distillery was like no other distillery. At the time, whiskey distilleries looked more like factories, mills, or manufacturing facilities. Taylor built his distillery to look attractive and appealing, styling the main building to resemble a medieval European castle, which included a classically inspired springhouse and sunken gardens. The location became a tourist attraction. Taylor paved the way for bourbon tourism by building a train station and updating the road infrastructure to allow visitors and cars to more easily reach the distillery. At the heart of the distillery is Taylor's original water source. Knowing how important good water was to whiskey production, Taylor referred to his water source as the key to his success and built it in the shape of a giant keyhole. These two signature aspects of the distillery provided easy inspiration for the modern name of the Castle & Key Distillery. From production to tourism, Taylor drove real innovation and modernization in many aspects of bourbon. Perhaps his greatest legacy will be the political lobbying to ensure the passage of the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, the first consumer protection law in the United States. In 2014, the founding partners for Castle & Key purchased the Old Taylor Distillery, which had sat abandoned since the 1970s, and began restoring this icon of bourbon history. The Castle & Key brand believes in transparency and emphasizing quality over quantity. They produce all their products on site from grain to glass using Colonel E.H. Taylor's original water source. The first product I'm going to talk about is the Castle & Key Sacred Spring Vodka. The Castle & Key Sacred Spring Vodka is truly a unique premium vodka with some real character. Instead of using just one grain such as corn, which is common for American vodka, this distillery is distilled in-house from the brand's bourbon mash bill of 73% white corn, 10% Kentucky rye, and 17% Kentucky malted barley. The grain mash bill is first distilled in their 32-inch Vendome copper column still, followed by a 600-gallon copper pot still, then further distilled to the highest purity on their custom Vendome vodka still. The distillate is cut or proofed down to 80 proof or 40% ABV with the mineral-rich limestone water from the Key, which is a 140,000-gallon naturally fed historic key-shaped spring. The name Sacred Spring Vodka speaks to the importance of the springhouse as the water source for this made-from-scratch vodka recipe. The label detail highlights the springhouse's key shape and represents the water as liquid gold. The next product is the Castle & Key Roots of Ruin Gin. The Castle & Key Roots of Ruin Gin is distilled from grain to glass on site. The base spirit is distilled to 190 proof or 95% ABV from the brand's rye mash bill of 17% yellow corn, 63% Kentucky rye, and 20% Kentucky malted barley. The first distillation is done in the 32-inch Vendome copper column still, followed by a 600-gallon copper pot still, then further distilled to the highest purity in their custom Vendome dual basket gin still. The 7 botanicals are all sourced locally from the state of Kentucky and feature chamomile, ginger, angelica root, lemon verbena, rosemary, licorice root, coriander, and juniper. Just like with the vodka, this product uses the mineral-rich limestone water from the Key, which is the 140,000-gallon naturally fed historic key-shaped spring in the heart of the distillery. The Roots of Ruin name refers to restoring the property and creating something new while honoring the site's history. The label highlights the native botanicals used in the gin recipe and showcases the turret of the castle. This product is bottled at 106 proof or 53% ABV, which means it will hold up well in cocktails. Next is the Castle and Key Restoration Rye. The Castle and Key Restoration Rye pays homage to the restoration of the property, with the imagery highlighting the special care and attention to detail of all the hands that have worked to create and release the brand's first whiskey. The mash bill is 17% yellow corn, 63% Kentucky rye, and 20% Kentucky malted barley. The Castle and Key Distillery has two 50-foot tall column stills with a doubler, one 24 inches wide and the second 32 inches wide, made by Vendome Copper and Brass. One still is named Maribel after Colonel E.H. Taylor's wife, and the second is named Fanny after his daughter. The rye is distilled to 135 proof or 67.5% ABV, reduced to a barrel entry proof of 118 or 59% ABV, and matured on site in toasted number 3 and number 4 charred barrels sourced from Speyside Cooperage in Kentucky. The brand takes a vintage-dated approach to emphasize the consistency of quality and flavor. The batch size never exceeds 80 barrels. This product is bottled around 100 proof or 50% ABV with a plus or minus of 5 proofs based on the release. And just to give a little further detail, I'm going to highlight a couple of the previous releases. The 2020 batch number 1 had a 3-year-old age statement with a batch size of 60 barrels, bottled at 103 proof or 51.5% ABV. The 2020 batch number 2 had a 3-year-old age statement with a batch size of 57 barrels, bottled at 99 proof or 49.5% ABV. The 2021 batch number 1 had a 3-year-old age statement with a batch size of 80 barrels, bottled at 101 proof or 50.5% ABV. The 2021 batch number 2 had a 3-year-old age statement with a batch size of 75 barrels, bottled at 104 proof or 52% ABV. The 2021 batch number 3 had a 4-year-old age statement with a batch size of 70 barrels, bottled at 105 proof or 52.5% ABV. The 2022 batch number 1 had a 3-year-old age statement with a batch size of 60 barrels, bottled at 113 proof or 56.5% ABV. The 2022 batch number 2 had a 3-year-old age statement with a batch size of 60 barrels, bottled at 105 proof or 52.5% ABV. Next is the Castle and Key Bourbon. The Castle and Key brand produces both a traditional and wheated bourbon. Each bourbon line will have a small batch, single barrel, and bottled in bond label. The traditional bourbon mash bill is 73% white corn, 10% Kentucky rye, and 17% Kentucky malted barley, and the wheated bourbon mash bill is 73% white corn, 10% white wheat, and 17% Kentucky malted barley. The Castle and Key Distillery has two 50-foot tall column stills with a doubler, one 24 inches wide and the second 32 inches wide, made by Vendome Copper and Brass. One still is named Maribel after Colonel E.H. Taylor's wife, and the second is named Fanny after his daughter. The bourbon is distilled to 135 proof or 67.5% ABV, reduced to a barrel entry proof of 115 or 57.5% ABV, and matured on site in toasted number 3 and number 4 charred barrels sourced from Speyside Cooperage in Kentucky. I'm going to highlight a few releases from the Castle and Key small batch traditional bourbon. The 2022 batch number 1 had a 4-year-old age statement with a batch size of 80 barrels, bottled at 98 proof or 49% ABV. The 2022 batch number 1 had a 4-year-old age statement with a batch size of 80 barrels, bottled at 98 proof or 49% ABV. The 2022 batch number 2 had a 4-year-old age statement with a batch size of 80 barrels, bottled at 99 proof or 49.5% ABV. The 2022 batch number 3 also had a 4-year-old age statement with a batch size of 40 barrels, bottled at 96 proof or 48% ABV. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to receive updates anytime I have new content on my website or this YouTube channel, please consider signing up for my newsletter. I'll include a link below in the description. If you would like to support the content here, please consider gifting me a cocktail through the link below in the description or through becoming a Patreon member. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, please drink responsibly.